My name is Alara. And I died. The memory is a film reel seared onto the back of my eyelids, playing in a perpetual horrifying loop. The set was chaos, a staged kidnapping scene for a blockbuster film. Smoke, thick and acrid, stung my eyes before I even saw the flames. They licked up the flimsy set walls with an unnatural speed fueled by paint and fabric. My wrists and ankles were bound with rough rope for the scene, a gag stifling my screams. I could only watch, my eyes streaming, as the man I had loved for 7 years, Julian Thorne, burst through the inferno. His gaze swept over me, trapped and terrified, and landed on the woman cowering near the exit, Lillian Graves, his beloved, his white moonlight. Without a second glance in my direction, he scooped her into his arms and carried her to safety. The roar of the fire drowned out my muffled pleas. I was furniture, a prop, a stand-in who had outlived her usefulness. The heat was in physical weight, crushing the air from my lungs. The last thing I felt was the agonizing kiss of the flames on my skin. Then I was floating, a disembodied spectator to my own tragedy. I saw Cashin Vale ignore the firefighters, his face a mask of frantic determination as he charged into the blazing ruin I was trapped in. He emerged moments later, his clothes smoldering, cradling a blackened, unrecognizable form. My body. He didn't take me to a morgue. He drove my corpse to his home, a silent, sacred vigil. In his bathroom, his hands trembling with a tenderness that shattered my spectral heart, he cleaned my scorched remains and dressed me in a beautiful, pristine white gown, a dress that looked like it was made for a bride. Then he looked at my ruined face, smiled the saddest smile I have ever seen, and slit his wrists. As his life bled away into the bathwater, staining it crimson, I heard his final whispered words. Alara, if there's another chance, will you love me? I, a ghost with no voice, nodded with all the will I possessed. A searing headache exploded behind my eyes and I gasped, drawing in a sharp, clean breath. The smell of smoke was gone, replaced by the familiar scent of backstage dust and coffee. Miss Alara, it's your turn now, my assistant Maya whispered, nudging me gently. I was sitting in a plastic chair, a casting script heavy in my lap. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. I knew this day. It was the audition for Echoes of Tomorrow, the film that would kill me. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from nerves, but from the sheer, overwhelming reality of my rebirth. I was back. My gaze swept across the waiting room, and it snagged on a figure sitting in a shadowed corner. Cashin Vale. Our eyes met for a fleeting second and he quickly looked away, a faint blush creeping up his neck. In my first life I'd thought nothing of it. Now the memory of his suicide, of his question, echoed in my soul. Why did he look at me like that? Why did he die for me? In my previous life I had auditioned for the female lead Lillian's role. I'd nailed it. The director had loved me. But Julian Thorne, the film's primary investor, had given the part to Lillian the moment she returned from abroad. I was demoted to the second female lead, a constant, living shadow to the original. Not this time. When my name was called, I walked into the audition room with a new purpose. I bypassed the pages for the female lead entirely. I'd like to audition for the role of Sienna, I announced, my voice clear and steady. A murmur rippled through the room. Sienna was the third female lead, a spirited artist with a tragic arc. The director, Mr. Albright, looked intrigued. An interesting choice. Why Sienna? Her emotional journey is more complex, I said, which was partly true. The whole truth was that Sienna shared most of her scenes with the third male lead, a reclusive painter played by Cashin Vale. I read the lines, pouring all the pain of my death, all the longing for a second chance into the performance. When I finished, the room was silent. Thank you, Alara, Mr. Albright said, his eyes thoughtful. We'll be in touch. As I left, I felt Cashin's gaze on my back like a physical touch. The rest of the day unfolded with a grim familiarity. Lillian Graves made her grand entrance, all soft smiles and calculated charm. The announcement came, Lillian would be the female lead. The whisper started again. The original is back, the stand-in has to step aside. Lillian glided over to me, her smile not reaching her eyes. I'm so sorry, Alara. The director thinks I'm more suited for the lead. You'll just have to take the supporting role. I met her gaze evenly, a small, cold smile touching my lips. There's no need to apologize. I auditioned for Sienna. The lead and supporting roles are all yours to fight over. The smile vanished from her face, replaced by a flash of pure venom. She leaned in close, her voice a hushed threat. A supporting role is just a supporting role. You'll never be on the big stage. As long as I'm here, the lead will always be mine. I simply shrugged. Whatever. I didn't want the lead anyway. That evening my phone rang. Julian's name flashed on the screen. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I took a deep breath and answered. "Come wait for me at the Skyline penthouse tonight," he commanded, his voice dripping with a casual authority that once made my heart flutter. Now it made my skin crawl. "Julian," I said, my voice unervingly calm. "Let's end this." A beat of stunned silence. "What are you doing, Alara? Is this about the role?" "Don't be childish. This isn't about a role. I'm serious. Our agreement was for 3 years. It's over. Besides, now that Lillian is back, you can pursue her properly." His voice dropped, turning icy. "Fine, Alara. But don't you dare regret this. When you come crawling back, it won't be so easy." "I would rather die," I said softly, and meant it with every fiber of my being. I ended the call and blocked his number. The 3-year contract. He'd found me after a disastrous night 3 years ago, when Lillian had abruptly broken off their engagement and left the country. I resembled her just enough. He offered me resources, a lavish lifestyle, and the faint, cruel hope that he might one day see me. I had been so blind, so desperately in love, that I signed the contract, selling 3 years of my life to be a living ghost. But that Alara was gone. Burned away in that fire. Now I had a new purpose. To live for myself and to understand the man who had loved me enough to follow me into death. The first day on set was a surreal experience. I moved through the familiar routines with a sense of detached déjà vu. I kept a close watch on Lillian, searching for any sign that she remembered the fire, that she was as culpable as I suspected. But she was the picture of professional innocence. My scenes with Cashin began quickly. Our characters, Sienna and the painter Kale, were drawn to each other, 2 lonely souls finding solace. Acting opposite him now, with the memory of his suicide seared into my mind, was agonizing and electrifying. He was quiet, almost painfully shy, delivering his lines with a soft intensity. But when the cameras weren't rolling, I caught him. The secret glances, the way his eyes would follow me when he thought I wasn't looking. They weren't the leering stares of a possessive man like Julian. They were filled with a deep, aching reverence that left me breathless. I tried to muster the courage to just ask him, to bridge the chasm of our non-existent history. But the words always stuck in my throat. How do you ask someone, "Why did you kill yourself over my corpse?" The opportunity came unexpectedly. A sudden, heavy downpour caught the crew off guard one afternoon after shooting. I was heading to my car when I saw him standing under the eaves of a storage building, looking lost. His assistant was nowhere to be seen. The image of him, alone and drenched in the rain of my past life, flashed before my eyes. Without overthinking it, I pulled my car up beside him and rolled down the passenger window. "Need a ride?" I asked. He looked startled, then nodded a little too quickly. "Thank you." He slid into the passenger seat, sitting ramrod straight, his hands folded neatly in his lap as if afraid to touch anything. The silence was thick, filled only by the drumming of rain on the roof. At a red light, a mischievous impulse took over. I turned to him. "Cashin," I began, and he flinched slightly. "Why do you keep looking at me on set?" His face turned a spectacular shade of crimson, the color spreading all the way to the tips of his ears. He stammered, a series of half-formed words and sounds, completely flustered. The tension broke and I couldn't help but laugh. It was a genuine light sound I hadn't heard from myself in years. "Is it because I'm pretty?" I teased. He nodded frantically, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and adoration. When I dropped him off at his modest apartment building, he practically fled from the car, muttering a rushed "thanks" over his shoulder. I sat there for a moment, watching him disappear inside, a strange warmth blooming in my chest. Unbeknownst to us, a paparazzi had snapped a photo of Cashin in my passenger seat. It was blurry, inconsequential, but the internet, with its insatiable appetite for romance, pounced. #carpool couple started trending. Our few scenes together were spliced into sweet montages, and a small but fervent fanbase began rooting for us. As we continued filming, I sought him out during lunch breaks. I noticed he was incredibly picky with the craft services food, pushing vegetables around his plate with a frown. Remembering the bone broth he'd made for me in another life, I started serving him myself, picking out the dishes he seemed to tolerate and adding them to his tray. He never refused. Whether it was something he liked or secretly hated, he would eat every last bite, his eyes downcast as if receiving a sacred offering. Then came the day to film the kidnapping scene. I had no call time, but I went to the set anyway. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. This was it. The site of my murder. I watched from the shadows as they set up the scene. Lillian was there in my old place. Julian was visiting, watching from the director's monitor with a possessive arm around her shoulders. My palms were slick with sweat. I waited for the spark, for the first lick of flame. But nothing happened. The scene was shot in one clean take. No fire. No chaos. No death. In my previous life, Lillian had demanded over 20 retakes, insisting on perfection, keeping me bound and gagged for hours. Now it was clear. The fire hadn't been an accident. It had been a calculated move, and she had been waiting for the perfect moment to trigger it. A moment that, in this timeline, never came because I wasn't in the scene with her. As I turned to leave, my phone vibrated. It was Julian calling from an unknown number. I should have known he wouldn't be blocked for long. The moment I answered, his voice, raw with fury, blasted through the speaker. "Alara, are you serious about this? You're really doing this? Is it because of that nobody, Cashin? You've got your eyes on a cheap actor now." He had seen the shipping rumors. A cold calm settled over me. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I do like him." "So what?" He was silent for a moment, then his tone turned dangerously quiet. "You even sold the penthouse." "Yes," I replied. "Thank you for your generosity, Julian. It sold for a very high price." I hung up, my hand trembling only slightly. I was cutting the strings one by one, but I knew the puppet master wouldn't let go so easily. A few days later, I was eating lunch with Cashin when a shadow fell over our table. Julian stood there, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the casual set environment. His eyes were locked on me, burning with a possessive fire. Before I could react, his hand shot out and closed around my wrist, his grip like a steel vice. "We need to talk," he snarled and began dragging me away from the table, away from a wide-eyed Cashin. "Julian, let me go. I have scenes this afternoon." I struggled against his grip, but he was impossibly strong. He didn't even look back. He dragged me all the way to his idling town car, shoved me inside and barked at the driver, "Go." The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the studio, Cashin, and my sanity behind. I scrambled to the far side of the seat, putting as much distance between us as possible. "What is wrong with you?" I spat, rubbing my sore wrist. He pulled out his phone, made a single call. "The set is closed for the day. Everyone goes home." He tossed the phone aside and turned his venomous gaze on me. "There. No scenes to shoot." Then his hand snaked out, his fingers closing around my throat. Not enough to cut off my air completely, but enough to terrify me, to show me he could. "Alara," he whispered, his voice a deadly caress. "You've gotten bold. You dare hang up on me? You dare sell what I gave you?" I stared back at him, the memory of the fire giving me a courage I didn't know I possessed. "Our agreement is over." His grip tightened. "Did I say it was over?" "The time is up," I choked out. "We're finished." Rage contorted his handsome features. His fingers squeezed. I gasped, my lungs burning. I clawed at his hand, my nails digging into his skin, but he was immovable. Black spots danced at the edge of my vision. I was going to die. Not in a fire, but at the hands of the man I once loved. The irony was a bitter pill. In my ears, I heard Cashin's voice from my past life, a lifeline in the darkness. "If there's another chance, will you love me?" No, I thought with a sudden violent surge of will. "I won't die. Not like this." Suddenly, Julian's phone rang, the generic trill cutting through the tense silence. The sound seemed to break his trance. He looked at the screen, Lillian's name, and his grip loosened just enough for me to drag in a ragged, painful breath. He answered, his voice shifting to a concerned murmur. "What is it, Lily? You twisted your ankle? Where are you?" He listened for a moment, then glanced at me, his eyes cold and dismissive. He told the driver to stop. We were on a deserted, rain-swept road on the outskirts of the city. He opened the car door. The sound of the downpour was deafening. "Stay here and cool off," he said, and with a shove he pushed me out onto the muddy shoulder. The door slammed shut and the car sped away, its taillights disappearing into the gray curtain of rain. I landed hard on my knees, the cold mud seeping through my clothes. I had no phone, no purse, no money. I was a public figure, stranded and utterly alone. "Julian Thorne," I whispered to the uncaring sky, "you are truly cruel." But I was alive. And I had to stay that way. I had to find out why Cashin had done what he did. I forced myself to stand, my body trembling from adrenaline and cold. Every step was a struggle. The rain blinded me, the wind whipped my hair into my face. I slipped and fell, my hands scraping on the gravel, then pushed myself up again. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to move forward. Just as a wave of despair threatened to swallow me whole, just as my legs gave way, a miracle appeared. A car pulled over, its headlights cutting through the gloom. The door flew open and Cashin Vale emerged, his face a mask of pure anguish. He didn't even bother with an umbrella. "Elara." He was there, his arms around me, lifting me from the mud as if I weighed nothing. The warmth of his body was a shock against my chilled skin. "It's you," I managed to whisper before the world went black. I came to in the soft glow of lamplight, lying on a plush sofa. The smell was familiar, clean linen and a faint hint of sandalwood. I knew this place. I had been here as a ghost. This was Cashin's home. I was still soaked. He knelt beside me, his eyes dark with worry. "Elara, can you hear me?" I nodded weakly. He gently helped me sit up. "You're frozen. You need a hot bath." He went to the bathroom and I heard the water running. When he returned, he had a set of folded clothes in his hands. "These are for you." He moved to help me up, to guide me to the bathroom, but I froze, my eyes fixed on the open door, on the steam rising from the tub. My mind superimposed the image from my death. That same tub stained crimson with his blood, his lifeless body lying within. A whimper escaped my lips. I clung to him, my fingers digging into his arms, shaking my head frantically. Don't make me go in there," I pleaded, my voice trembling. He didn't question me. He simply bent down, his voice a soft murmur against my ear. "It's okay. You don't have to. But your clothes are soaked. You get sick. Can you change by yourself?" I nodded, still clinging to him. "Don't go. I'll be right outside the door," he promised. "I won't move. Don't be afraid." He carefully sat me back on the sofa and stepped just outside the bathroom door. Through the frosted glass, I could see the solid, reassuring shape of him standing there, keeping his promise. I washed up as quickly as my trembling hands would allow, not daring to close my eyes for fear of seeing the blood. I pulled on the clothes he'd given me, soft, expensive cotton pajamas that fit perfectly. When I emerged, he was still there, a silent sentinel. He carried me to his bed, tucked me under the duvet and brought me a cup of steaming ginger tea. Then he fetched a hairdryer and carefully, tenderly dried my hair. His fingers were gentle, soothing. When my hair was dry, his expression darkened. His fingers lightly traced the ugly, purpling bruises on my neck, the marks Julian's hands had left. His jaw tightened, a muscle twitching. "Your neck," he whispered, his voice thick with a pain that seemed to emanate from his very soul. Seeing the raw regret in his eyes, I reached out and hugged him, burying my face in his chest. "It's fine," I said, my voice muffled by his shirt. "It's over between him and me. We'll never have anything to do with each other again." That night I slept in Cashin's bed, surrounded by his scent. He took the guest room. It was the most peaceful, secure sleep I'd had since being reborn. For the first time I felt truly safe. I woke to the smell of bacon and coffee. Sunlight streamed into the bedroom, a stark contrast to the storm of the previous night. On the floor beside the bed sat a pair of fluffy pink rabbit slippers and a beautiful, simple linen dress. Even a set of delicate lace-trimmed underwear, all in my exact size. I looked down at the women's pajamas I was wearing. They were new, but they fit as if tailored for me. A cold dread trickled down my spine. Does Cashin have a girlfriend? I changed and followed the delicious smells to the kitchen. Cashin was at the stove, his back to me. He turned and a soft smile touched his lips when he saw me in the dress. "It fits," he said, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Cashin," I began, sitting at the small breakfast nook. Did we know each other before? Before the audition?" The smile vanished from his face, replaced by a deep, profound hurt. "Ilara," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You really don't remember me?" I searched his face, the earnestness in his eyes, but my memory remained a blank. "When you were little," he prompted gently, "at Oak Ridge Orphanage. I was the small, quiet boy the others always picked on. You were the one who protected me." A dam broke in my mind. Memories, faded and sepia-toned, flooded back. A scrawny boy with big, sad eyes, always hiding in the library. The older kids pushing him, stealing his books. Me, a scrapper even then, stepping in front of him. "Leave him alone," I'd shout. After that he'd followed me everywhere, a silent, grateful shadow. I'd protected him until the day a kind-faced couple adopted him. "That was you." I breathed, my eyes wide. "The quiet boy with the glasses?" He nodded, a shy smile returning. "You called me your personal shadow. Why didn't you tell me earlier?" I asked, my heart aching. He looked down at his hands. "I was afraid of disturbing you. I thought, if I knew you were living well, I would never have shown up in front of you." "You could never disturb me," I said softly. Then the question I had to ask. "Oh, by the way, do you have a girlfriend?" His face flushed that endearing shade of red again, his eyes full of a hopeful light. "No." "Then, whose clothes are these?" I gestured to the dress, the pajamas. He took my hand and led me back to the bedroom. He opened the double doors of the large closet. I gasped. It was full. Dresses, blouses, trousers, coats. Every size was mine. The styles were all things I would pick for myself. And there, hanging at the far end, was a simple, elegant black dress. The very one he had put on my burned body in my previous life. My eyes filled with tears. I reached out and touched the sleeve. "Weren't you afraid I wouldn't wear them?" He smiled softly, his gaze tender. "It doesn't matter if you don't. As long as you're happy, that's enough." That was it. That was how, in my past life, he had been able to dress me. He had a closet full of gifts for a woman he loved from afar, never expecting to give them to her. The sheer, heartbreaking devotion of it shattered me. I threw my arms around him and sobbed, all the pain and fear and confusion of 2 lifetimes pouring out of me. "Cashin, I'm not a good person. I was with Julian, You don't have to explain," he whispered, holding me tight. "I know. I don't mind." Suddenly, an urgent, violent pounding shook the front door. Cashin, unsuspecting, got up to answer it. I heard the property manager's voice, and then the door was shoved open with brute force. Julian Thorne stood in the doorway, his suit rumpled, his eyes wild. He took in the scene, me in Cashin's clothes, my tear-streaked face, the domestic intimacy of it all, and a savage rage consumed him. He didn't say a word. He just lunged forward and landed a heavy, brutal punch directly on Cashin's jaw. Cashin stumbled back, hitting the wall with a sickening thud. "Where is she?" Julian roared, his gaze locking on me. I rushed to Cashin's side, helping him up from the floor. "Are you okay? Does it hurt? Let me take you to the hospital." Julian reached for me, but I yanked my arm away, my own fury rising to match his. "What is wrong with you?" I screamed. "I told you we're finished." "I'm crazy," he shouted back, his chest heaving. "I checked every surveillance camera on the whole road to find you. And you want to end things with me for this pretty boy?" "Yes," I said, my voice firm and final. "Fine, Ilara. I'll wait for the day you come crawling back to me." He turned and left, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. I quickly helped Cashin to the sofa, my hands trembling as I examined his swollen, bleeding face. "Let me take you to the hospital." "I'm fine," he said quietly, his eyes searching mine. "I don't need a hospital. As long as you've ended things with him, that's enough." He touched my cheek gently. "He's not a good man." The fallout was swift. The next day we returned to set only to discover that Cashin's role had been drastically reduced. All of our shared scenes, the heart of Sienna and Kale's story, had been cut. I didn't need to guess whose influence was behind it. But Cashin didn't seem to care. He found me during a break, his expression serene. "I only took the role because of you," he admitted. "As long as you're by my side, it doesn't matter whether I act or not." His words were a balm, but I knew the battle with Julian was far from over. The next scene I filmed was a driving sequence with Lillian. A sense of dread settled in my stomach as I got into the car with her. Halfway through the shot, The car suddenly swerved violently, the steering wheel jerking in the stunt driver's hands. It slammed into a large oak tree at the side of the road. The impact was jarring. As I was lifted into the ambulance, one clear, cold thought cut through the pain. Lillian is insane. She'd risk her own life to get rid of me. I didn't die. I had a mild concussion and a broken leg. A clean fracture, the doctor said. It would heal, but it would take time. Cashin became my guardian angel. He moved me into his home officially, and true to his word, he cooked for me every day, a rotating menu of nutritious meals with an emphasis on bone broth. He helped me to the bathroom, carried me to the sofa, and read scripts with me. His quiet, steadfast care was a universe away from Julian's performative, conditional affection. Lillian hadn't been so lucky. Shards of the windshield had cut deep into her face. The doctors said that even with the best plastic surgery, she would be left with visible scars. Her most valuable asset, her perfect camera-ready face, was marred. I was gathering evidence, preparing to sue the driver for negligence when he came to me first. He was a nervous, weaselly man who confessed that Lillian had paid him to stage a minor crash, one that would rattle me, or give me a career-ending injury. But the car had genuinely malfunctioned, and the results were far more severe than planned. Now, with her face disfigured, Lillian was refusing to pay him the rest of his money. He had a recording. He played a snippet for me. Lillian's voice, cold and clear. Just make sure she never works in this town again. A little scare won't be enough. He wanted $4 million from me in exchange for the full recording. Blackmail. I agreed, got the recording, and immediately took it to my lawyer. Just as I was preparing to release it to the media and bury Lillian once and for all, Julian confronted me. He showed up at Cashin's apartment, bypassing the intercom by tailgating another resident. He didn't even say hello. If you dare release that recording, he said, his voice low and dangerous, then within the hour the contract you signed with me will be plastered all over the internet. Every sordid detail. The world will know exactly what you were to me. It was a nuclear option. The contract outlined my role as his paid companion, a substitute. The humiliation would be public and absolute. Even so, my finger hovered over the button. Revenge was so close. Cashin pressed my hand down gently. Don't rush, he murmured. There are other ways to deal with them. While I was still recovering, Lillian herself came to my hospital room. She wore a large scarf and sunglasses, but I could see the angry red lines peeking out from beneath the frames. She looked down at me, her smugness barely containing her fury. Look at you, Alara. Even if I ordered the driver to crash the car and wanted you dead, so what? As long as Julian's with me, nothing will happen to me. But you, 3 years have passed and you're still stuck playing a supporting role in my drama. She leaned in. I suggest you be smart and leave Julian sooner rather than later. I smiled at her, a cold, pitiless smile. You fool. Do you really believe a selfish man like Julian loves you so much? A man like him only loves himself. Her face twisted with anger. If you don't stay away from Julian, don't blame me for being ruthless. Oh, and what exactly will you do, Miss Graves? I asked sweetly. Who even wants to be with Julian Thorne? Don't forget the real reason you went abroad 3 years ago. Her expression changed instantly, the color draining from what was left of her unscarred skin. Alara, how dare you bring that up? If it weren't for you, I would have already married Julian. I laughed lightly. Miss Graves, you're joking. Just then the door swung open. Julian stood there, his face a thundercloud. He had heard everything. What happened 3 years ago? He demanded, striding into the room. Lillian, didn't you go abroad to develop your career? Both Lillian and I fell silent. You're both not talking? He said, his voice dangerously quiet. Fine. I'll find out myself. He turned and left, leaving a vacuum of tension in the room. I looked at Lillian's pale, terrified face. The truth about 3 years ago was my final card to play. The night that started it all. A business banquet, a spiked drink, a hotel room key Lillian had casually tossed to me, thinking she was discarding a problem. Me, a naive young actress, finding a drugged, delirious Julian Thorne. Him mistaking me for her in the dark. And Lillian showing up at dawn to find me in her place, threatening me into silence before fleeing the country to avoid the scandal. Julian had never known it was me. He believed it was Lillian that night and that her departure was a betrayal. He'd come to me afterward, offering me a contract, seeing a pliable substitute. I had agreed not just for the resources, but because he had once saved me from a mudslide years before, a debt I felt I owed. But I had already died repaying that debt. This life was my own. With my legs still in a cast, I formally withdrew from echoes of tomorrow. The world outside Cashin's apartment felt dangerous and unpredictable. Living with him was easy. He had already prepared for my presence, as if he had always been waiting for me to come home. Julian inevitably discovered the truth about that night. I didn't know the details of his confrontation with Lillian, but he came to Cashin's door again. This time he looked haggard, the arrogance gone, replaced by a desperate weariness. I was on the sofa when Cashin, after checking the peephole, looked at me. "It's him. Do you want to see him?" I thought for a moment, then nodded. I needed to end this for good. Cashin let him in. "I'll go buy some groceries," he said to me, his voice calm. "I'll make you soup when I get back." I smiled at him. "Hey, bring back a few peaches too." The simple domestic exchange made Julian flinch. Once we were alone, he looked at me, his voice pleading. "Alaire, I bought back the penthouse. Do you still want to be in that drama? If you want it, I'll stop the whole crew and wait until you've recovered." I gave him a distant, polite smile. "No need, Julian." He knew. He knew how much I had wanted that role, and he'd given it to Lillian anyway. "Love that comes too late is cheaper than grass," I said softly. "I no longer care for it." "Do you want me to deal with Lillian?" he muttered, conflicted. "I won't," I answered simply. The memory of burning alive was too vivid. The feeling of his hands on my throat was too fresh. "I will never forgive you." "Is it because of him?" he asked, his eyes darting toward the door Cashin had left through. "Yes," I said, my gaze steady. "And no." Watching his body tremble with the realization that he had truly lost me, I gave him a clear dismissal. "It's late, Julian. Please leave. I won't see you out." He clenched his fists, the old Julian threatening to resurface, but in the end he just turned and walked away, a broken man. When Cashin returned, he was quieter than usual. I hobbled into the kitchen to watch him put away the groceries. "Why are you in here?" he asked. "Go sit on the sofa." "Cashin," I said, using his character's name without thinking. "You're not happy." A trace of pure, unadulterated hurt crossed his face. "Julian came to see you. Are you going back to him?" The question was so absurd, so heartbreaking that I didn't answer with words. I leaned forward, balanced on my good leg, and kissed him. It was just a soft, quick press of my lips against his, but it froze him completely. The hurt on his face melted away, replaced by stunned, disbelieving joy. He just stood there staring at me, his ears turning bright red. I, who had once been a master of composure, actually felt my own face flush. "Don't just stand there staring," I mumbled, looking away. "Go wash me a peach. I want to eat one." He stood up, his whole being radiating a giddy excitement. "Okay," he said, his voice breathless. "I'll go wash you a peach." He was so easy to please, so easy to love. With Cashin's diligent care, my leg healed faster than the doctors predicted. In less than a month I was walking normally, the cast replaced by a supportive brace. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm within the safe harbor of his love. Then Cashin received an invitation to be a guest on a popular travel reality show, Wanderlust. The producer quietly hinted he could bring a family member. Bored of convalescing and secretly tired of bone broth, I decided to go with him. The show was a revelation. We hiked through stunning landscapes, explored foreign markets, and completed silly challenges. Cashin, the quiet introvert, blossomed in this environment when he was with me. Even when he was punished with a messy food item, his first instinct was to make sure I wasn't splattered. The cameras ate it up. When the first episode aired, the internet exploded. Our natural chemistry, the tender looks, the way he always put me first. It was catnip for the shippers. Hashtag Cass and Alaire became a permanent fixture on the trending lists. We were the it couple, the real-life fairy tale. And just as quickly the backlash came. Overnight, a coordinated smear campaign was launched against Cashin. There were grainy photos of him entering a hotel room, allegations of sleeping with a powerful older female producer for his first role. There were edited audio clips suggesting he badmouthed co-stars. The evidence looked damning and the trolls descended. Overnight, Cashin was public enemy number one. My social media was flooded with messages from concerned fans. "Open your eyes, Alaire. He's using you. We told you he was trash. Cashin wasn't afraid for his career. The only thing he feared was that I would believe the lies. The moment we returned from filming Wanderlust, the storm broke. Cashin's phone buzzed incessantly, his agent, the network, worried friends. He ignored them all, his focus entirely on me. As soon as we crossed the threshold into our apartment, he took my hands, his eyes wide with a fear I had never seen in him before. Elara, he said, his voice tight. None of it is true. The hotel room. I was delivering a script to Director Evans because her assistant was sick. I was inside for 5 minutes. The audio is spliced, taken from a conversation I had with my agent about a difficult co-star years ago. It's all. I pressed my fingers to his lips, silencing him. I know, I said softly. I've always known the kind of man you are. The relief that washed over him was so profound it left him trembling. He pulled me into a crushing embrace, burying his face in my hair. I don't care about any of it, he whispered. I only care that you believe me. I did. Completely. And I knew with a cold certainty that settled in my bones, exactly who was behind this. Julian Thorne. This smear campaign was a warning shot, an attempt to isolate me, to prove that the world outside his control was ugly and false. He thought it would send me running back to him. He had no idea that my feelings for Cashin weren't a fleeting infatuation born of a film set. They were forged in the fire of my first death and tempered in the peace of my second chance. This time I would fight. The next day the producer of Wanderlust called me personally, his voice laced with apology. Elara, we think it's best if you sit out the next leg of the trip. The controversy, it's just too much. But Cashin is still required to go? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Yes. His contract is ironclad. The next location was a notoriously treacherous mountain range. It was a death trap waiting to happen. Julian wasn't just trying to ruin Cashin's reputation. He was trying to create an opportunity for a fatal accident. That was the final line. He had threatened me, hurt me, and now he was targeting the man I loved. It was time to burn his world to the ground. I went to the safe where I kept the recording of Lillian and the driver, along with the file Cashin's private investigator had compiled on her. I had held back, hesitant to wield this ultimate weapon, but Julian had left me no choice. I didn't go to the media. I went directly to the police. I handed over the recording of Lillian conspiring to cause me a career-ending injury, which, given the result, was attempted murder. Then I handed over the photos the PI had unearthed, crystal-clear images of Lillian using cocaine at a party in Los Angeles 3 years ago, and the financial records showing massive tax evasion on her earnings abroad. The arrest was swift and public. Lillian Graves was taken from her home in handcuffs, her scarred face pale with shock, shielded from the paparazzi cameras by a jacket thrown over her head. The charges were attempted murder, drug possession, and tax evasion. It was a career ender. It was a life ender. The scandal was nuclear. The narrative online flipped in an instant. Cashin was vindicated, his name cleared as the public's fury turned toward the true villain. The news channels were saturated with the fall of Lillian Graves. My phone rang. It was Julian. His voice was strained, almost admiring. Lillian's been taken away. He said it as if expecting my gratitude. I know, I replied, my tone flat. I was the one who gave the police the recording and the drug photos. A long silence. It was you, he finally said, the pieces clicking into place. You hired the investigator. Cashin did, I corrected him. He sensed something was wrong long before I did. He protected me. Elara, he began, his voice laced with a strange, desperate grief. Do you know why back when I asked you to be with me you agreed? Because you once saved me, I said, the words feeling ancient and hollow. 7 years ago on that film shoot in the mountains. The mudslide. A tree pinned my leg. You pulled me out. You thought I was Lillian, but you saved me. I owed you a debt. I took a deep breath. But I already died once, Julian. That life, that debt, it's paid. This life I'm living for myself. Don't ever try to hurt Cashin again. Something happens to him, I will go with him. Let's just part ways peacefully. I hung up. There was nothing left to say. The line between our lives had been severed finally and completely. By the time Cashin returned home from his prematurely cancelled trip, the digital storm had passed. The online world had declared him a wronged hero, and our love story was more celebrated than ever. He found me curled on the sofa watching the fallout on the news. He didn't say a word. He just walked over, gathered me into his arms and held me. I could feel the steady, solid beat of his heart against my cheek. "It's over," I whispered. "I know," he murmured into my hair. "It's finally over." With the shadows of Julian and Lillian gone, our lives opened up like a sun-drenched field after a long storm. We were free. A few weeks later, Cashin took me to meet his parents. The drive to the quiet suburbs was filled with a comfortable silence, his hand resting on my knee. I'd expected a grand estate, given the quiet elegance Cashin possessed, but he pulled up in front of a charming, well-kept cottage with a sprawling garden. "Don't be nervous," he said, squeezing my hand. "They're going to love you." His adoptive parents, Helen and David, were a warm, simple couple whose faces lit up when they saw us. They welcomed me with open arms, their home filled with the smell of baking and the evidence of a life well lived. Over a dinner of hearty roast chicken they told me stories. "Back when Cashin was a teenager," Helen said, her eyes twinkling, "he saw you on TV for the first time. In that little commercial for lemonade. It was like a light switched on inside him. He'd always been a quiet boy, but after that he had a fire in him. He fought his way into those acting classes, worked any job he could find. He said he had to get into the industry." My eyes welled with tears. I looked at Cashin, who was staring intently at his plate, his ears turning pink. "He just wanted to be close to you," David added gently. "But by the time he was cast in something big enough, you were already spoken for." I reached for Cashin's hand under the table, lacing my fingers with his. "You should have told me," I whispered, my voice thick. "You could never have disturbed me. How could you think that?" He finally looked at me, his gaze full of a lifetime of quiet longing. "When I first found out about you and Julian Thorne, I contacted him." My breath hitched. "You did?" He nodded. "I asked him if his intentions toward you were honorable. He brushed me off. Said you were just someone he was playing around with. That I should stay in my lane." He swallowed hard. "That's when I decided to keep my distance. I only ever hoped you'd be happy, Alara. Even if that happiness didn't come from me." The raw, selfless love in his confession shattered me. I thought of my first life, of how I had been so blind, so devoted to a man who saw me as a toy, while this man, this beautiful, loyal soul, had been watching from the shadows, his heart breaking for me. I couldn't hold back the tears. I threw my arms around him right there at the dinner table and broke down in great, heaving sobs. No matter how he tried to soothe me, whispering that it was okay, that it was all in the past, I couldn't stop. I was crying for the Alara who died alone and betrayed. I was crying for the Cashin who had to watch it happen. I was crying for the years we had lost to pride and cruelty and silence. Choking on my tears, I pulled back and looked into his eyes, the memory of his suicide a fresh wound. "Cashin," I whispered, my voice raw. "If I had died back then in that fire, what would you have done?" He didn't hesitate. He looked at me with an absolute, terrifying sincerity. "I would have gone with you." I knew he meant it. I had seen it. Later, as Helen showed me photo albums of a gawky teenage Cashin, she paused on a picture of him holding a small, scruffy dog. "He always had such a soft heart," she said softly. "Even at the orphanage he was the one who looked after the younger kids, the injured birds. Until you came along. Then he said you were the one who looked after him. You were his hero." The pieces of my life, of both my lives, snapped together into a perfect, heartbreaking whole. The boy I had protected had spent his entire life trying to find his way back to me, to protect me in return. We drove home in a comfortable silence, the city lights blurring past the windows. When we got back to his apartment, I walked over to the closet and ran my hand over the rows of dresses. "Cashin," I said, a teasing note in my voice to lighten the heavy emotion of the day. "We're practically retired and you're still buying me dresses. Why did you get me another one this week?" He came to stand behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and resting his chin on my shoulder. "You look beautiful in dresses," he murmured. "But I don't even like wearing them that much," I confessed, leaning back into his warmth. He went still. "You don't." He turned me around, his face a picture of confused disappointment. "But at the orphanage, when the donors would come and bring the little girls in those frilly princess dresses, you always looked at them with such envy." "But I thought you loved them. My heart ached for the children we had been. I reached up and cupped his face. Oh, Cashin. I wasn't jealous of the dresses. I smiled faintly. I was jealous of the fact that they were surrounded by love. They had families. They were chosen. His expression softened, the confusion melting into understanding. He pulled me close. You don't have to envy anyone anymore, he whispered into my hair. You are so deeply loved. You are my choice. You always have been. And in the circle of his arms I finally, truly believed it. Time, which had once felt like a countdown to a tragic end, now stretched before us, languid and sweet. We traveled just as we had on Wanderlust, but without the cameras. We hiked in Patagonia, got lost in the Medinas of Morocco, and ate gelato on cobblestone streets in Italy. We lived. On a trip to the Canadian Rockies, we stood on a viewing platform overlooking a glacial lake so turquoise it didn't look real. The air was thin and cold and the snow-capped peaks were mirrored perfectly in the still water. Cashin closed his eyes, his lips moving silently in a wish. I watched him, this man who had loved me across lifetimes, and my heart felt so full I thought it might burst. I reached into the pocket of my coat and pulled out the small plastic stick I had been carrying for 2 days. I tapped his arm. He opened his eyes and I placed the pregnancy test in his palm. He looked down. The 2 solid pink lines. His breath hitched. He looked from the test to my face, his eyes wide with disbelief, then back to the test. A single tear traced a path down his cheek, then another. Elara, he whispered, his voice cracking. I nodded, a joyful sob escaping my lips. Yes. He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and swept me into his arms, spinning me around carefully on the icy platform. He was crying openly now, tears of pure, unadulterated joy. I love you, he choked out between kisses pressed to my hair, my cheeks, my lips. I love you so much. I promise I will spend the rest of my life making you happy. Both of you. Our daughter Lily was born 9 months later, named for the resilience of the flower that blooms after the harshest winter. She had his quiet, observant eyes and my stubborn streak. She was our miracle, the perfect embodiment of our second chance. When she was 3, I was holding her in a department store, waiting for Cashin to bring the car around, when a familiar voice sent a cold shiver down my spine. Elara. I turned. Julian Thorne stood there looking older, more worn. And beside him, clinging to his arm, was a young woman. She couldn't have been more than 22 and she looked like me. Or rather, like I had looked 7 years ago. The resemblance was uncanny and it made my stomach turn. The moment he saw me, Julian shook off the girl's arm with a sharp, almost panicked movement. His eyes darted from me to the child in my arms, his lips parting as if he wanted to explain, to say something that would erase the last 7 years. He walked over, his gaze fixed on Lily. Is this your child? He asked, his voice hollow. Yes. How old is she? 3. His eyes deepened, a world of pain and regret swirling in their depths. He looked back at me, the question he had been carrying for years finally spilling out. Elara, being with him. Have you ever regretted it? The ghost of my past life brushed against me. The fire, the loneliness, the feeling of being disposable. I have, I answered honestly. At my words, a flicker of hope, dark and possessive, ignited in his eyes. But I looked down at my daughter who was grinning up at me, her small hand patting my cheek. Then I lifted my head and saw Cashin jogging toward us through the crowd, his face lighting up when he saw us. A bag of the specific animal crackers Lily loved swinging from his hand. I smiled, a true, peaceful and utterly content smile. But it doesn't matter anymore, I said, my gaze meeting Julian's for the last time. I'm happy now. My husband was here. He swooped in, taking our giggling daughter from my arms. How many times have I told you? He scolded her gently, kissing her forehead. You're already a big girl. Don't make mommy hold you too long. It's tiring for her. I slipped my hand into Cashin's free one. I'll be going, I said to Julian. He didn't respond. He just stood there, a statue of regret in the bustling store as we walked away, a family whole and complete, leaving the ghosts of the past exactly where they belonged. Julian Thorne, an epilogue. I never thought she would leave me. Certainly not for a man like Cashin Vale. After Lillian went to prison, a profound silence descended upon my life. The penthouse was too large, the office too quiet. I found myself attending banquets again, searching for a familiar face in the crowd. That's when I saw her. From behind, with her hair styled that way, she looked just like Alara. Her name was Chloe. I offered her a contract. She signed. I gave her a penthouse, clothes, jewelry. I even put her in a small role in one of my productions. But it was a hollow pantomime. She had Alara's laugh, but it was too loud. She had her smile, but it was too eager. She was a cheap forgery, and every moment with her was a reminder of the original I had lost. One evening, I was having dinner with her at a restaurant Alara had loved when I overheard a couple at the next table gushing over a magazine spread about Alara and Cashin. They were in Switzerland, photographed laughing on a mountain slope. The secretaries in my office did the same, sighing over their relationship goals. I, who had always prided myself on my control, slammed my fist on the table, sending glasses rattling, and stormed out. I went to the skyline penthouse I had bought back for her. The door code failed. I knocked, and a stranger answered, telling me the unit had been sold over a year ago. I sat in my car and laughed, a bitter, broken sound. I called her and she told me it was over, her voice final, and hung up. The night I dragged her from the set, I nearly killed her. I saw the terror in her eyes, the absolute certainty that I would end her life. Pushing her out into the rain was an act of cowardice, a refusal to confront the monster I had become. The regret was immediate and violent. I used every resource, called in every favor with the traffic department, to find her on those cameras. Watching her limp through the storm, small and helpless, something in my chest tore open. And when I saw Cashin find her, carry her to safety, the desire to erase him became my sole purpose. But I had hurt her too deeply. When I used my influence to destroy Cashin's career, she retaliated with a precision that was breathtaking. She didn't just defeat Lillian, she annihilated her, and in doing so she severed the last thread that connected her to me. She told me she had only been with me because I saved her once. That was the cruelest cut. It meant the 3 years I had held her, the nights she had whispered my name in the dark, the way her fingers would trace my face as I slept. It had all been repayment. A transaction. But I knew. On those nights her love had been real. I had felt it. I had simply valued it too little, too late. 4 years passed. I saw her in the mall. The girl at my side, Chloe, was tugging my arm, her liveliness a poor imitation, and for a moment it almost worked. Then I saw Alara. She was holding a child. Our eyes met, and a panic I hadn't felt since I was a boy seized me. I shoved Chloe away, desperate for Alara not to misunderstand. I looked at the child, at her wide, curious eyes, and I was gutted by a future that would never be. If I had treated her better, would that be our child? Would we be a family? Marriage had always seemed a cage, but after seeing her with her daughter, I began to dream of it. I dreamed of the fire, of her tears, of me walking away. I dreamed of the police call, of identifying her body. I would wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, her name on my lips. One night I remembered her words. I already died once. In a fit of desperation I dialed her old number. To my shock it connected. She didn't speak. Alara, I blurted out, my voice ragged. When you said you died once, was it because of that fire? The line went dead. When I called back it was disconnected. That night I dreamed of her again. She was young, sitting across from me, a contract between us. She smiled, her eyes full of hope. If I don't sign this, she said, I'll regret it. Then the scene shifted and I was the one trapped in the fire. I felt the searing heat, the agony of the flames, the betrayal as I watched myself carry Lillian away. The pain was absolute. I woke up gasping, the smell of smoke clinging to the air. Alara, I whispered into the darkness of my empty penthouse. Will you forgive me this time? In the early hours of the morning, a fire started in the kitchen of the Harrison penthouse. The newspapers reported that Julian Thorne, CEO of the Harrison Group, was burned to death inside. Investigators found no evidence of foul play. The cause of the fire, they concluded, was a forgotten cigarette left smoldering on a stack of old, forgotten contracts. The end.